Battle of the Bulge was not the Battle of Bastogne, and that's all you hear about.
Imagine a 16-ton tank against a tiger and a panther.
Attributed all this to Patton. He wasn't even there.
See, I don't know why the First Army is ignored. The First Army just about did all the fighting in the ETO.
When we went into Belgium, I was one of the first Americans in Belgium, but we left north of Paris in late afternoon on September the 1st, and we crossed into Belgium on September the 2nd at 6:30 in the afternoon. 100 and some miles we made in just a little more than 24 hours. That was supposed to be one of the longest opposed drives in the war.
See, I don't know why the First Army is ignored. The First Army was the first in England. The First Army was the first in France, Omaha Beach. The First Army was the first in Paris. The First Army was first in Belgium. The First Army was the first to cross into Germany. They completely ignore it. The First Army just about did all the fighting in the ETO.
Yeah, and you watch these documentaries, and they're full of lies about that.
God.
I was watching one the other day about the breakout of St. Lo. You know, we'd been in the hedgerow country for 6 weeks. Couldn't get out of the hedgerow country, very slow. So they decided that they'd try something new. High altitude bombing of the front line. It had never been done before. So the Air Force, of course, the Air Force screwed up. They were supposed to come parallel to the line. That was too dangerous. That subjected them to any aircraft from Germany. So they came over us. Bombs fell short, some of them. So they scrapped the mission. And the next day they came over and tried it again. It was worse. We had 681 casualties in our division from our own Air Force. And General McNair had just joined my battalion. He wanted to witness this, and he got killed. And we never found anything except his helmet.
I saw the bombing of St. Lo.
I watched that.
I watched it. All you could see was a big cloud of dirt.
After the bombing, our division was to make the breakout, which we did. We reorganized, even though we'd lost all 681 men, and we pushed off, broke through the line, and got into the open country. And this program I was watching attributed all this to Patton. He wasn't even there. He showed up about the day of the bombing of St. Lo, which ended the Normandy campaign.
He was in England with this fake army.
There were villages where they had a lot of these tanks that were made out of plastic. You probably heard about whether they were made up, and that was supposed to be the special army that Patton was going to lead as the second invasion. Right. And that was all spread over on the newsreel. Of course, this was mainly after, Patton had tried to do something. And the thought is that they said that the Germans feared Patton because of all this advertising, and they were afraid that he was going to lead another army, and that's why they had to keep a number of people along the English Channel as far as the Germans were concerned.
He took much more territory, much more than any other general, in any other army in World War II.
Yeah, well, you have some stories with Patton, right? Yeah. You met him a few times, right?
He was starting the 2nd Armored. As I mentioned before, we only had one armored division at the United States in June of 1941 before Pearl Harbor. And the Germans probably had about 12, and the Russians had about 15. So we were totally unprepared, and what we had was 16-ton Stuart tanks. And when Walters was at Kasserine Pass down there, imagine a 16-ton tank against a tiger and a panther. Impossible. And of course, then he was captured, and then he ended up in the same prison camp where my battalion commander, or regimental commander, had been captured on June the 9th. We didn't know what happened to him. He was leading a patrol, which is very unusual for a regimental commander, and he was captured, and we didn't know what happened to him. But when he came in, he was on our right flank. He came down the west side of France, and I was in the task force that took St. Lo, and then we went down Bully-Baudin and got involved in the Falaise Gap. And after they had that Falaise Gap, he proceeded eastwardly across France, and they said there are going to be about 15,000 Germans on the Brittany Peninsula. Well, what happened when he came on down the westerly side of France there, all the people, all the German troops fled to the west, and instead of having 15,000, we had 45,000 prisoners. And then once that was conquered, then of course it was clear to go through the Falaise Gap again and go eastwardly, and Patton led that.
See, the 82nd and the 101st and the 1st Infantry, all these divisions belonged to the First Army, were part of the First Army.
Yeah, it was all First Army.
It was all the First Army doing the fighting. And later on, long afterwards, then the Third Army came in, and then even farther later, the Ninth Army under Simpson.
I always understood that Patton moved too fast to call off two operations we had with the 101st. I went to the marshalling area twice. One was to jump just before Paris and cut them off there behind the lines, you know, to give them, try to capture a bunch of prisoners. And before they was retreating pretty fast. But they said we got to the marshalling area, brought ammunition and a weapon, you know, everything, rations and money, all that, francs. And then again, we went to the marshalling area to jump in Tournai, Belgium, I think it was.
Okay.
The same thing. It was behind while they was retreating. And of course, I don't know, but they said it was Patton moved too fast and went over our jump area where we were supposed to jump. But there were some people already suited up with in their parachutes and in the air who was that close to taking off.
Really?
It
Wow.
was finally canceled.
You watch the news and the documentaries in Hollywood. The Battle of the Bulge was not the Battle of Bastogne, and that's all you hear about.
Well, yeah,
The
that's
major
right.
thrust was to the northwest.
Yeah.
They had
We
to
know
go to
that.
they had to go to Liège.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's what
They had to go to Liège
That's what they
to
exactly.
get. We had a big supply depot there. The Germans figured they'd get to Liège, get more gasoline supplies, and then go on to Antwerp. So they had all the Panzers were all going this way. Of course, as soon as the Bulge started, the First Army sent divisions down to the North Shoulder, and every time they'd try to break through, there'd be an American division there. And they finally got stopped at Stavelot, L'Église. It was our division and the 82nd Airborne.
I was wounded on the 21st, the same day the unit got surrounded.
Okay.
And I laid in Bastogne until they opened up.
What did you think about the German 88s?
Powerful. They were much
Those
better guns.
things
Much
were
better
deadly.
guns.
Well, tell me this, were they better than the 90s?
Well, the 90s was a little bit better than what we had, but I still felt that the 88 was superior to the 90.
Because I know they were shooting those 88s here in Holland. You know,
Well, they were powerful guns.
Yeah.
They were the best. They really were.
personnel.
They could go 30,000 feet straight up.
It was originally designed as an anti-aircraft. Then they found out they could use it for anti-tank and
Anti-personnel, everything.
yeah. A bar of soap was like gold. Right? With a bar of soap, you could do things you wouldn't believe.